Ladies and gentlemen, this is UX and this is World War One Oversimplified Part 2 by the channel Oversimplified. We saw the World War One video from Oversimplified Part 1 yesterday. Obviously, this just refreshed my memory because I've read so many World War One videos about, how fucked up that was because it was so new, right? It was new type of technologies were introduced in that one, tanks, gas attacks and everything. People had to change their clothes, how uniforms were and everything. Trench warfare was just horrendous, right? Dead bodies everywhere for months, years, smelling like shit. Basically everybody shelling, everybody created a cell shock effect, PTSD. It was just all around horrible, right? World War II was worse, really worse. But World War I was worse in the sense it had a shock factor. It was a new thing. So yeah, that's what it's on. Remember, this is a simplified video. Like I said, it's weird with this channel. Sometimes, this videos gets content ID, I guess, claimed or whatever. But it takes a day or two. So I don't know which video is going to get claimed or not. And like I said, I can't have content ID claims on my channel. That's an issue. So, there's going to be checkered box there on the video. But if it's an issue, play the original side by side. There's a link in the description with the original video, I guess. Yeah, let's watch it.
With both sides stuck in a hard stalemate, they knew this war wasn't going to be about taking territory, but about simply wearing each other down. The Allies had plenty of men to expend from its overseas dominions. And the British also started a naval blockade, so Germany couldn't import stuff, like food. Neither side really wanted a long grueling war though, so they both thought of ways to break the deadlock on the Western Front. Idea number 1, new frontiers. When the war first broke out, Australia was quick to take German New Guinea. The Allies also quickly jumped on Germany's colonies in Africa, and particularly in German East Africa, locals were enlisted as soldiers and carriers by both sides, leading to a tragic loss of life for the native Africans. Some new combatants entered the war as well. The Allies' new friends were Italy and Japan.
Yeah, so basically World War One, if you really look at it, it's not really world war, it's a European war, right? But then again, if you see how European colonies were basically colonizer in different places like Africa, Asia, it was a world war because Europe war is world war because all the European colonies are going to fight too.
Japan was busy building itself an empire, so it was more than happy to take away German islands and colonies in East Asia. Italy actually had an alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary before the war, but after some tense relations, and then the Allies promising to give them some of Austria-Hungary's stuff,
they switched
sides. Italy opened up a front in the mountains here, but like everyone else, they were stuck in...
Yeah, I was surprised that too. When I read the World War I Epic History video series, right? In that I was surprised too because I knew that Italy was with allies, but at the start they were not. I'm like, what the hell? Okay, then later on they switched the side.
Stalemate for most of the war. The Central Powers' new friend was a struggling empire in the Middle East.
Ottoman Empire.
The Ottoman were divided on whether to actually join the war or not, since they had been exhausted by the recent Balkan Wars. Some of the politicians who did want to join went off on their own and fired some shells at Russia, and then came back and said, whoops, looks like we're at war now. The Ottoman entry into the war was of particular concern to the British, since the Middle East was full of oil, and Britain wanted all of that oil. First, the Ottomans tried to attack Russia in the Caucasus Mountains, but they weren't prepared for the cold, and many of them froze to death. Then they crossed miles of desert.
I've said many times, Russia should just have their slogan, that coal is our biggest ally. That is our biggest defense, basically, coal. Because it doesn't matter who you are. Throughout history, anybody tried to attack Russia, coal has been the biggest defeater, I guess.
The Suez Canal from the British, but that failed too. Then the Allies tried to take the Dardanelles at Gallipoli in a long and hard trench warfare campaign, but that also failed. The Ottomans blamed their initial losses on the ethnic Armenians living within Ottoman territory, and the resulting Armenian genocide led to the deaths of 1.5 million people. Then the Germans sent spies into Afghanistan to try to convince the Arab tribes there to rise up in jihad against...
Okay, is it just me? His volume is way too low in this video.
British and attack India. But that plan failed, partly because the spies got bored, brewed their own alcohol, and got drunk, which is a bad thing to do in Afghanistan. All these new frontiers hadn't done much to change the war. Aware that the Allies had more men and supplies than them, the Germans knew they had to do something to break the stalemate. Before the war, there was a big conference that set out the rules of modern warfare. No chemical weapons, no killing civilians. Basically, don't be jerks.
Germany
Germans held a meeting and decided to be jerks.
Oh yeah.
Zeppelin air raids commenced over British cities. They also started attacking the Allied trenches with chlorine gas, and they used submarines to sink civilian ships. One such civilian ship was the Lusitania.
Yeah, U-boats basically. Damn, Germany was way too aggressive in World War One, right? I mean, obviously, Archduke dying, basically getting shot, was just an excuse. Everybody had their agenda, especially Germany. But the point is, the war started with Archduke getting shot, right? So the center of the point was Austria. And what happens was Germany was the basically the center of all attacks, while Austria feels like more of a supporting country, even though they were the main reason the war started, right? And in the end, even Austria is like, okay, we give up, while Germany was still fighting. I mean, if there is a clear sign of excuse, this was one, because Germany was clearly the one was fighting the main war, well, even though the war started because Austria's Archduke got shot.
Which had 159 Americans on board when it was sunk, further swaying US opinion against the Germans.
Yay, Germany! Ah, Germany, please. Someone about to get liberated. In the end, Muriga.
Not to be completely unfair to the Germans, the Allies also engaged in chemical warfare soon after, and they had been hiding anti-submarine weapons on their civilian ships, which let the Germans justify their attacks.
Yeah, about chemical attacks. Chemical attacks are, so weird, right? I mean, it's a mustard gas is a chemical attack. But it was so weird because people, attacked with chemical weapons, mustard gas, and then they realized, oh, wait a minute, the wind changed. The wind is facing our side, so it's lots of time they just did friendly fire, right? Attack with the mustard gas and it hit them rather than the enemy.
Meanwhile, Austria-Hungary still hadn't dealt with Serbia, so the Central Powers enlisted some help. Bulgaria wished it was bigger and was still bitter about losing the Second Balkan War. The Central Powers promised to make all of Bulgaria's wildest dreams come true if they helped, so they signed on, and together they knocked out Serbia. The Serbian troops retreated through Albania, which was neutral but had some ties to Austria-Hungary. So Austria-Hungary entered Albania in a friendly invasion to chase down the Serbians, many of whom escaped by sea. It's 1916, and a lot is happening. As if they didn't have enough enemies already, Germany added one more to the list. Portugal had been getting a bit chummy with the Allies behind the scenes, and Germany didn't like that one bit.
That is something, right? Look at that. Portugal, then Spain, then France, and then Germany. It's so far away from the Germany. Germany's like, oh, I'm going to attack you too. I declare war on you. I declare war on you. I declare war on everybody. Germany was just left and right attacking everyone.
Around the same time, the only sea battle of the war happened. Both sides had a new powerful class of battleships called dreadnoughts, but they were so expensive to build that neither side wanted to risk losing them in a battle. So they kept them in port, except for one time when they had a big fight and a bunch of them got damaged, so they didn't try that again. The UK started conscripting men to the army, so they had plenty of reserves, which is just as well because the Western Front was about to get brutal. The longest and one of the bloodiest battles of the war started when the Germans launched an attack around the French city of Verdun. The French
Oh, this was what I was talking about, yesterday basically in the first part about the trench warfare. This is what I was talking about, Verdun, right? That's the city. So basically Germans were really going hard at Verdun and French cannot let go of that city. So France basically told British to, make sure the pressure eases around here. So attack in some different part of the trenches. So all of the German troops are not attacking here. So British basically send their, their people, basically all the civilians and everybody who came here, basically via enlisting or whatever. They just send them knowing they're going to die because they had to make sure that, Verdun is not under pressure too much. Otherwise, Verdun falls. That's just effed up situation. Tactically, that makes sense. But if you look at from the outside perspective, it's just fucked up knowing that these people who just came here, who's not even soldiers, who just enlisted now, who are just flowerish to whatever, shopkeepers, whatever, just enlisted to help the country, help the war, are just going there to get mowed down by the machine guns.
Desperately, leading to hundreds of thousands of casualties. Under pressure, the French called on its allies to do something to draw the Germans' attention away. So the British started their own fight, the Battle of the Somme, with 60,000 British casualties on just the first day.
That's just effed up. It was
also here that the British first used one crazy brand new piece of sci-fi technology. The Russians had been getting pushed back further and further into their own territory, but in response to the French call for help, they began a huge offensive, and did really well until they ran out of supplies and got stuck. Seeing how well the Russians had been doing, Romania decided now would be a great time to jump in and win the war.
Pummeled.
And then they got pounded. The Greeks were fighting amongst themselves about whether to join the war or not. The king liked this.
They were basically just looking at Russia. How is Russia doing? Yeah, Russia holding out all right. I guess we should go declare war too. And they just got pummeled.
Central Powers, while the Prime Minister wanted to join the Allies. After a brief national schism, during which the country split into two, the king finally abdicated and the country reunited. With Allied help, they began a new offensive.
I guess Allied had something to do with that, settling of the schism or whatever. Allies basically nudged the decision towards their favor because they needed this. This was a strategic position.
In the Middle East, Russia was pushing into Ottoman territory from the north. The British had also made a landing in Mesopotamia to protect Persia's oil fields, and they had also sent a small army up the Tigris River to try to take Baghdad, but the army got sieged in the town of Kut along the way and eventually surrendered. A new offensive was launched from the south with all-out desert warfare. The offensive was aided by one famous British officer, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, who helped lead the Arab tribes in a revolt that wreaked havoc on the Ottoman supply lines. By the time 1917 rolled around, everyone was exhausted. There were mutiny
Look at that. This is so good, right?
supply lines.
Look at that. All of them are fighting for Switzerland, just that, we are neutral. Nothing to see here. All the mountains and things will protect us.
By the time 1917 rolled around, everyone was exhausted. There were mutinies in the French army, the German populace was starving, and the war had drained all of Russia's supplies. There was no clear winner, and it was still anyone's war. The only question now was, who was going to break first? And the answer was Russia. Tired of not eating and mad that a crazy magic homeless guy was calling some of the shots, there was an uprising in Petrograd complete with riots and strikes.
Yeah, basically, Tsar Nicholas was leading his army without seeing what is happening in his home, right, where he should be, and sending a great general instead of him. But no, he said, I'm going to do this myself. And basically, he got screwed.
The riots turned into a full-scale revolution, and a new government overthrew the Tsar. Then a few months later, the Bolsheviks overthrew the new government, and they pulled Russia out of the war. This was great news for Germany, who now only had to focus on the Western Front. But there was still one problem. The pesky United States of America was looking increasingly like it was going to join the war. America had been selling supplies to the Allies throughout the war.
So Germany is like, oh, look at that, Russia gave up. There's a revolution, everything, communism is here, Soviet Union, all right. So that's good. We just have to focus in one side. And then in the far distance, a faint music starts to play and gets louder and louder. America, fuck yeah.
The war, and was getting super rich off the back of it, meaning it was in fantastic shape and was dangerous to the Germans. So Germany sent a telegram to Mexico saying, wouldn't it be crazy cool if you guys attacked America? But the British intercepted the message, showed it to the Americans, and that was the final straw. American troops began shipping out to Europe. This was terrible news for Germany, and they knew their only hope now was to force France and the UK to surrender before the fresh American troops arrived. It was now or never, so they started one final attack. They converged their troops and hit hard at the Somme and pushed the Allies back. They hit a second time further north, then again and again. With each hit, the Germans were spending more and more resources, while the Allies were getting better and better at repelling their attacks. By the fifth punch, the Allies held the line and even pushed back. With American troops now arriving in larger numbers, the Allies launched a counterattack, and that was it. The Central Powers were being pushed back on all fronts. Bulgaria collapsed first, followed by the Ottoman Empire, then Austria-Hungary, and finally on November 11, 1918 at 11 o'clock, Germany surrendered. At the peace treaty, Germany was forced to reduce its military, accept war guilt, and pay the bill for the war. After indescribable suffering and millions dead, the world learnt its lesson and never had such an awful war again. For about 20 years.
There you go. And Hitler would come around and it would be even worse. Yeah, so see the thing is, what I've just, realized that whether it's World War I, World War II, it always goes like this. Some, enemy rises up, basically spreads around, take over places, then suddenly pressure rises and they collapse back into them, and there you go. That's over. That's how I guess our immune system works. A virus comes, suddenly, spreads in your body, and then our immune system shrinks it down. That same happened in World War I, basically, Germany and Austria, because they lost in this analogy, the other virus, they suddenly grew and then they shrunk down. Same thing in World War II. Germany basically grew, but grew a lot, took entire France and everything, then they shrunk down again. Damn, alright. Yeah, but in this Treaty of Versailles happened and that caused Hitler in World War II. But when you really think about it, Treaty of Versailles was not that, not that far-fetched to think about, right? Because how Germany acted in World War I, they were way too aggressive, right? In every front. They suddenly attacked France, right? They suddenly, oh, Portugal, I'm against war against you too. I'm war against you. They were attacking everybody, basically. So the way they were aggressive at that time, Allies had to make sure this doesn't happen again. So they did Treaty of Versailles. But that's what caused it again in World War II, because of Treaty of Versailles. That's what's effed up. So second around time, they're like, okay, I guess this time we are not going to do Treaty of Versailles type of thing. We're going to be chill now. Alright people, that was World War 1 Oversimplified by the channel Oversimplified. If you like my reaction, if you like, subscribe, check out the reaction, this link in the description, check out the cards, please check the card and comment down which next Oversimplified video you want me to react to. And yeah, I'll see you next time.